We've all been told the same story since grade school. History is a straight, ascending line. We started as hunter-gatherers, moved to bronze tools, then iron, and eventually reached the Silicon Age. It's a neat, comfortable narrative. But there's a major problem. The stones don't lie. Scattered across our planet are fingerprints of a past that simply shouldn't exist. I'm talking about granite walls in India polished to a mirror finish with sub-millimeter precision. I'm talking about 3,000-ton blocks of stone in the Siberian wilderness that make our modern cranes look like toys. And I'm talking about an entire mountain that wasn't built, but carved away to reveal a temple so complex it defies the laws of logic. If the history books are right, and our ancestors only had stone hammers and hemp ropes, then what we are looking at is, quite literally, impossible. These aren't just ruins. They are anomalies. They are remnants of a high-technology past that was wiped clean from our collective memory. Today, we are going beyond the usual mysteries. We're diving into 9 specific sites, from the sunken basalt city of MADOL to the 25,000-year-old pyramid of Gunung Padang. We are looking for the truth behind a forgotten epoch. Because if these structures are real, and they are, then everything we know about our own origins is wrong. We are a species with amnesia, staring at the echoes of a greatness we've forgotten. Are you ready to see what they're hiding? Let's begin. Our journey into the impossible begins on the island of Java, Indonesia. Nestled among the rolling green hills and lush tea plantations of West Java is a place that the locals call Gunung Padang. In the local dialect, it means the mountain of light. For generations, people thought this was just a natural hill, perhaps a bit oddly shaped, crowned with some scattered ancient stone terraces. To the untrained eye, it looked like a simple megalithic site, maybe a few thousand years old at most. A place for local rituals, but nothing that would change the world. But everything changed in 2011. A geologist named Dr. Danny Hillman Nadawadjaja noticed that the geometry of the hill was far too precise to be a product of nature. He suspected that the hill wasn't just on top of a structure. The hill was the structure. He and his team began a multi-year investigation using the most advanced tools available: ground-penetrating radar, seismic tomography, and deep core drilling. They wanted to see what was breathing beneath the grass. What they found didn't just surprise the scientific community, it sent shockwaves through the halls of academia. They discovered that Gunung Padang is actually a massive 4-layered pyramid, built level upon level over vast stretches of time. But as they drilled deeper, the timeline didn't just move back a few centuries, it jumped back tens of thousands of years. The top layer, the one we can see, dates back to roughly 500 BC. The second layer, hidden just below the surface, was built around 7,000 years ago. But it was the third and fourth layers that truly defied logic. The carbon dating from the organic soils trapped between the stones at these depths came back with a staggering result. Up to 25,000 years old. Let's put that into perspective. 25,000 years ago, our planet was in the deep freeze of the last ice age. According to every mainstream history book, humans at that time were primitive hunter-gatherers. We were supposed to be struggling for survival, following animal migrations, living in temporary shelters. We weren't supposed to know how to farm, let alone how to organize a massive labor force to move millions of tons of volcanic rock and arrange them into a geometrically precise pyramid. But at Gunung Padang, the evidence is set in stone. The builders used columnar jointing, naturally forming volcanic pillars. But they didn't just leave them where they fell. They cut them, hauled them up the mountain, and laid them down like bricks. They even used a mysterious ancient mortar, a kind of cement made from clay, iron, and silica to bond the structure together. Inside, the radar scans revealed massive hollow chambers, hidden rooms deep within the pyramid that we haven't even stepped foot in yet. If these dates are correct, and the carbon dating says they are, it means that an advanced civilization existed on a lost continent called Sundaland, long before the sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age. It means that while we thought humanity was in its infancy, someone in Indonesia was already mastering masonry, architecture, and structural engineering. The mainstream academic world is still fighting these findings. Many archaeologists refuse to believe the dates because, if they accept them, they have to admit that our entire understanding of human history is a lie. They would have to throw the textbooks in the trash and start from zero. But the stones of Gunung Padang aren't interested in academic reputations. They are there, buried under the soil of Java, waiting for us to realize that we aren't the first advanced civilization to walk this earth. We are just the latest. Gunung Padang isn't just a hill. It's a giant reset button for the human story. From the hidden pyramids of Indonesia, we travel west to the heart of India, to the Ellora Caves. Among the 34 monasteries and temples here, one stands alone as a defiance of engineering logic. Cave 16, the Kailasa Temple. Most buildings are constructed by adding pieces together, brick by brick, stone by stone. But Kailasa is different. It wasn't built, it was revealed. Imagine a massive basalt mountain. Now imagine a group of engineers standing on the peak, and instead of building up, they started carving down. This entire breathtaking complex, twice the size of the Parthenon in Athens, was carved out of a single solid rock. The scale of this feat is almost incomprehensible. Archaeologists estimate that over 400,000 tons of basalt rock were removed to create this temple. Think about that number for a second. That is nearly 500,000 tons of one of the hardest stones on Earth, chipped away with nothing but hammers and chisels. According to mainstream history, this was completed in just 18 years, during the 8th century. Let's do the math. If they worked 12 hours a day, 365 days a year, for 18 years, they would have had to remove roughly 60 tons of rock every single day. That's 5 tons every hour. Remember, they weren't just clearing rubble, they were carving intricate gods, elephants, and complex bridges with astronomical precision. One wrong strike of the hammer, one crack in the wrong place, and the entire structure would have been ruined. There was no undo button, no way to patch a mistake. But the mystery goes even deeper than the carving itself. If you remove 400,000 tons of rock, you should have a mountain of debris somewhere nearby. Yet, to this day, no one has found the excavated waste. There is no evidence of where that rock went. It's as if it simply vanished. Then there's the design. The temple is a perfect representation of Mount Kailash, the celestial abode of Lord Shiva. It features a 100-foot-tall tower, a courtyard with giant stone elephants, and multi-story galleries connected by stone bridges that were all part of the original single block of stone. Modern engineers have looked at the layout and admitted that even with our 21st century 3D modeling software and laser cutters, replicating Kailasa from the top down would be an absolute nightmare. So how did they do it? How did they visualize a three-dimensional cathedral inside a solid mountain before they even touched the rock? Some say it was the work of a lost high technology. Ancient legends speak of a Brahmastra, a tool that could turn stone into vapor. Whether it was divine intervention or a forgotten technology, Kailasa Temple stands as a monumental glitch in our history. It's not just a temple. It's a negative space masterpiece that proves our ancestors were capable of things we still can't fully explain. Leaving the monolithic wonders of India, we cross the ocean and climb 13,000 feet into the Andes Mountains of Bolivia. Here, in the thin, cold air of the Altiplano, lies Puma Punku. At first glance, it looks like a chaotic graveyard of scattered stones. But as you look closer, you realize you aren't looking at ruins, you're looking at a prehistoric factory. What makes Puma Punku so haunting is the precision. We are looking at massive blocks of red sandstone and andesite. Now, andesite is one of the hardest stones on Earth. To cut it today, you would need diamond-tipped saws and high-powered industrial lasers. Yet, at Puma Punku, these blocks feature perfectly straight lines, uniform 90-degree internal angles, and surfaces so flat that if you place two blocks together, they form an airtight seal. Look at the famous H-blocks. These are modular units, almost like giant Lego pieces, designed to lock together in a complex earthquake-proof system. Each block is carved with such consistency that it suggests they weren't made by hand, but by a standardized manufacturing process. Now think about the timeline. Mainstream archaeology tells us that the people who built this, the Tiwanaku, had no writing system, no wheel, and only used bronze and stone tools. Try to imagine cutting a 130-ton block of andesite with a copper chisel. It is physically impossible. It's like trying to cut a diamond with a butter knife. And then there are the drill holes. Along the edges of some blocks, you can see tiny, perfectly uniform holes and grooves. They are deep, straight, and consistent in diameter. If you were to show these to a modern CNC machinist today, they would tell you it was done with a high-speed drill. But 1,500 years ago, there shouldn't have been a power source, let alone a drill bit hard enough to penetrate this stone. The more you study Puma Punku, the more the primitive explanation falls apart. There is no soot from torches in the quarries, no discarded stone hammers that could have made these cuts, and no evidence of how these 130-ton slabs were transported across miles of uneven terrain at an altitude where oxygen is scarce. Some researchers suggest that the stone was poured like concrete, while others believe the builders used advanced sonic technology to soften the rock. Whatever the truth is, Puma Punku is a slap in the face to our current understanding of human progress. It's a place where the stones tell us a story of high-precision engineering that we simply aren't supposed to find in our past. If this was a factory, what were they building? And more importantly, who were the engineers? Just a short journey from the precision factory of Puma Punku, we arrive at the lightning-shaped fortress overlooking Cusco, Peru. SAKSAYWAMAN. If Puma Punku was about industrial perfection, SAKSAYWAMAN is about organic, megalithic power. When the Spanish conquistadors first saw these walls, they were so terrified that they believed the structure had been built by demons. And when you stand at the base of these stones, you begin to understand their fear. The first thing that hits you is the scale. We aren't looking at bricks here. We are looking at boulders, some of which are over 28 feet tall and weigh more than 120 tons. That is equivalent to roughly 70 family cars stacked into a single block of stone. But it's not just the size that defies logic. It's the way they are joined together. Look closely at the seams. These stones aren't squares or rectangles. They are irregular, multi-angled polygons. Some stones have 12, 13, or even more sides, all interlocking with the stones around them in a complex three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. And the fit? It is so tight that to this day, you cannot slide a single sheet of paper or even a human hair between them. There is no mortar, no cement, just stone resting against stone with absolute mathematical intimacy. Now, the official story says the Inca built this in the 15th century using trial and error. They tell us thousands of men pulled these stones with ropes and wore them down by rubbing them against each other until they fit. But think about the physics. How do you rub a 120-ton stone against another to get a perfect three-dimensional fit on all sides? If you lifted the stone to check the fit and it was slightly off, how would you move it back to shave off a millimeter? It's a logistical nightmare that defies every primitive explanation. Even more fascinating is how these walls handled disaster. Peru is a high seismic zone, but while modern buildings in Cusco have crumbled during earthquakes, the walls of SAKSAYWAMAN haven't budged. The stones were designed to dance. During a quake, they vibrate and settle back into their original positions. The builders understood structural resonance and earthquake-proofing centuries before modern engineering. Some researchers have pointed to a disturbing possibility. The stones look like they were softened. If you examine the surfaces, you'll see bulges and indentations that make the granite look as if it was once the consistency of bread dough or clay. Is it possible that the ancients possessed a technology to vitrify or soften stone, allowing them to mold it into these impossible shapes? The Inca themselves claimed they didn't build SAKSAYWAMAN. They said it was already there when they arrived. If they were telling the truth, then who were the giants who could turn mountains into puzzles? And what happened to the fire that could melt stone? We leave the high altitudes of Peru and travel to the scorching sands of Abydos, Egypt. Here, standing behind the magnificent temple of Seti Thend, lies a structural anomaly that seems to belong to a completely different world. It's called the OSIRION. For centuries, this structure remained hidden, buried under dozens of feet of silt and sand, until it was accidentally rediscovered in the early 1900s. And the moment you lay eyes on it, you realize something is wrong, very wrong. The Temple of Seti the force above it is classic Egypt, filled with intricate hieroglyphs, slender columns, and delicate art. But the OSIRION? It is brutal, massive, and completely silent. There are no original inscriptions, no carvings of kings or gods, just giant megalithic blocks of red granite, some weighing up to 100 tons, arranged in a stark, minimalist design that feels more like a modern power plant or a bunker than an ancient tomb. The architecture here is identical to the Valley Temple at Giza. We are talking about massive granite pillars cut with absolute geometric precision, supporting beams that are so heavy they would challenge the limits of modern cranes. But the real mystery is the depth. The OSIRION sits nearly 50 feet lower than the surrounding Egyptian temples. In fact, it is so deep that it is permanently flooded by the local water table. Mainstream archaeologists claim Seti I built this as a symbolic tomb for the god Osiris. But why would an Egyptian pharaoh build a temple that was intentionally flooded and sits tens of feet below the level of his own civilization? Think about the logistics. To build this at such a depth, you would have to excavate a massive hole in an area already prone to flooding, move 100-ton granite blocks from a quarry hundreds of miles away, and assemble them in the mud. It doesn't make sense, unless Seti I didn't build it. What if the OSIRION was already there? What if it's a remnant of a much older, pre-dynastic civilization, the same legendary first-time civilization that might have built the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid? Geologists have noted that the silt covering the OSIRION suggests it was buried by a massive ancient flood, the kind of flood that hasn't happened in Egypt for over 10,000 years. If that's true, then the pharaohs weren't the creators of these megalithic marvels. They were the inheritors. They found these structures, cleared the sand from the top, and built their own temples around them. Look at the flower of life symbol burned into one of the pillars at the OSIRION. Some say it was added much later, but others see it as a signature of a lost science, a geometry that connects all living things. The OSIRION isn't just a tomb. It is a subterranean echo of a time before history began, a time when humans moved mountains of granite as easily as we move bricks. Leaving the subterranean waters of the OSIRION, we return to India, to the Jahanabad district. Here, rising out of the earth like the back of a giant whale, is a massive granite outcrop. And inside this granite, someone, thousands of years ago, carved a series of chambers known as the BARABAR caves. At first glance, the entrances look simple, even primitive, but once you step inside, your entire perception of the ancient world changes. The interiors of these caves are not rough or rugged. They are polished to a mirror-like finish. We are talking about granite, one of the hardest materials on the planet, finished with such precision that it feels like glass to the touch. The walls are perfectly flat, and the arched ceilings are geometrically flawless. Mainstream history attributes these to the Mauryan Empire in the 3rd century BCE. But there is a massive problem with that theory. Even today, with our high-tech industrial grinders, achieving this level of optical flatness on a curved granite surface is an engineering nightmare. There are no tool marks, no signs of chisels. It's as if the stone was melted or molded by an unknown force. But the true purpose of BARABAR isn't visual, it's auditory. These aren't caves. They are resonant chambers. Because of the perfect geometry and the polished surfaces, the acoustics inside are unlike anything else on Earth. If you speak a single word, the sound doesn't just echo, it vibrates. It lingers for several seconds, bouncing off the walls in a perfect mathematical decay. If you chant a specific frequency, the entire room begins to hum. It feels as though the stone itself is coming alive. This suggests that the builders weren't just architects. They were masters of ancient cymatics. the study of visible sound and vibration. Why go to such extreme lengths to create a perfect acoustic environment inside solid granite? Some believe these caves were used for deep meditation, where sound was used to alter human consciousness. Others suggest they were part of an ancient global communication system, or even a form of sonic technology used to soften stone. Notice the Lomas Rishi cave. The entrance is decorated with intricate carvings of elephants, but the interior was never finished. It's as if the builders suddenly vanished in the middle of their work. When you stand in the silence of BARABAR, you realize that we have forgotten a fundamental science, the science of sound. These caves are not monuments to kings. They are instruments. And though we can still see them, we have lost the knowledge of how to play them. Deep in the remote mountains of southern Siberia, tucked away in the province of Kemerovo, lies a discovery that has sent shockwaves through the world of alternative archaeology. It's a site known as GORNAYA, SHORIA. If you thought the 800-ton stones of Baalbek were impressive, prepare yourself. Here, researchers have found a wall made of granite blocks so massive they dwarf anything ever found in Egypt or Peru. The numbers at GORNAYA SHORIA are simply terrifying. We are looking at granite slabs that are estimated to weigh between 2,000 and 4,000 tons. To give you a mental image, a single one of these stones weighs as much as 300 African elephants, or a fleet of 2,500 family cars. Modern engineering has only a handful of cranes on the entire planet capable of lifting something this heavy. And even then, only under perfect factory conditions. Yet, here they are, stacked on top of one another, forming a massive wall 40 meters high that stretches across the mountain ridge. Mainstream geologists argue that GORNAYA SHORIA is a natural formation, a result of exfoliation or tectonic pressure that cracked the granite into rectangular shapes. But when you look at the drone footage, the natural explanation starts to feel more like a desperate excuse. The stones feature flat faces, sharp 90-degree corners, and straight seams that look like they were cut by a giant's blade. In some sections, you can see massive blocks stacked with vertical joints that are intentionally staggered, exactly like a brick wall designed for structural integrity. Nature is capable of many wonders, but it rarely builds walls that look like they were designed by a master mason. Adding to the mystery, researchers who have visited the site reported that their compasses and electronic equipment began to malfunction near the stones. They recorded strange magnetic anomalies and intense energy readings that they couldn't explain. Is it possible that GORNAYA SHORIA is not a natural mountain, but a cyclopean ruin from an era so far back in time that we can't even fathom it? If these stones were moved and placed by human hands, then we are talking about a civilization with a mastery of gravity and energy that makes our modern technology look like primitive toys. We often think of the Ice Age as a time of darkness and survival. But perhaps, in the frozen heart of Siberia, a race of giants, or a civilization with forgotten power, left a signature that time itself couldn't erase. GORNAYA SHORIA forces us to ask, how big was the world before us, and how much of it have we simply forgotten to see? From the frozen giants of Siberia, we jump to the remote island of Pohnpei in Micronesia. Here, built directly on top of a coral reef, sits MADOL, an entire city of 92 artificial islets linked by a network of canals. What makes MADOL so baffling isn't just its location in the middle of the ocean, it's the material used to build it. The entire city is constructed from massive basalt columns, naturally forming volcanic logs, stacked crisscross like a giant log cabin made of stone. The scale of this project is mind-blowing. Archaeologists estimate that the total weight of the basalt used to create MADOL is approximately 250 million tons. To put that in perspective, that is more stone than was used to build the Great Pyramid of Giza. And here's the problem. There is no basalt on the reef. The nearest source of these stones is on the other side of the island, miles away, across rugged jungle and shallow lagoons. How did a culture with no wheels, no pulleys, and no metal moved 250 million tons of volcanic rock across the island and then precisely dropped them into the ocean to form stable islands. Modern divers have explored the waters around MADOL and found something even more shocking. There are massive stone pillars and structures deep underwater, suggesting the city we see today is only the top layer of a much older, much larger complex that was submerged when sea levels rose. The local legends of Pompeii don't speak of pulleys or ropes. They tell a story of two twin sorcerers, Olosopa and Olosipa, who arrived from a distant land. According to the legend, they didn't lift the stones. They used magic to make the massive basalt columns fly through the air and settle into place. Think about that. When the logistical reality of moving 250 million tons of stone is so impossible, the myth of levitation starts to sound like a distorted memory of a lost technology. Why would anyone go to such extreme lengths to build a city on a reef with no fresh water and no easy way to grow food? It makes no sense as a practical settlement. Was MADOL a fortress, a sacred ritual center? Or was it something more, a gateway or a machine built to harness the energy of the ocean? Some researchers have noted that the basalt columns contain high amounts of magnetite, which can create magnetic anomalies. As the tide rises and the waves crash against these ancient walls, MADOL remains a silent enigma. It is a city that shouldn't be there, built by a people we don't understand, using a method we can only call magic. For our final stop, we arrive on the island of Sardinia, Italy. Scattered across this rugged landscape are over 7,000 massive stone fortress towers known as NURAGHI. Built during the Bronze Age between 1800 and 1200 BC, these structures represent a level of architectural sophistication that simply shouldn't exist for that time. Imagine a civilization with no written language and no complex machinery, yet they managed to build stone skyscrapers that have stood for over 3,500 years. The most famous of these, NURAGHI, is a massive complex with a central tower that originally stood 3 stories high. But here is the impossible part. These towers were built using a technique called dry stone masonry. There is no mortar, no cement, and no clay holding these stones together. They stay in place through sheer weight and perfect placement. The builders used a tholos or corbelled dome design, stacking smaller and smaller rings of stones until they met at the top. This required an advanced understanding of physics and weight distribution. If the angle of the walls was off by even a fraction of a degree, the entire tower would have collapsed under its own weight centuries ago. Yet they endure. But the mystery isn't just how they built them, it's why. Why would a Bronze Age culture need 7,000 fortresses on one island? If you look at a map of the NURAGHI, you'll see they are often positioned within sight of each other. This suggests a sophisticated network, a prehistoric early warning system, or a way to communicate across the island using fire or mirrors. Even more baffling are the giants' tombs and the sacred wells found near the NURAGHI. The stonework in these wells is so precise, so smooth, that it rivals the megalithic masonry of the Inca or the Egyptians. They were designed to track the movements of the moon and the stars with astronomical accuracy. Who were these NURAGHIC people? Mainstream history portrays them as simple shepherds and farmers. But shepherds don't build 7,000 earthquake-proof towers. They don't master the physics of the corbelled dome. They don't align their wells to the lunar cycles. Some researchers suggest they were part of the legendary sea peoples who once terrorized the Mediterranean, or perhaps a remnant of an even older, lost Mediterranean civilization. As we look at the NURAGHI, we see the final piece of our puzzle. Whether it's in the jungles of Indonesia, the mountains of Peru, or the islands of Italy, the message is the same. Our ancestors were not primitive. They were masters of the earth, masters of stone, and masters of a science we are only now beginning to rediscover. 9 structures, 9 impossibilities. From the bottom of the ocean to the peaks of the Andes, the evidence is clear. The history of humanity is far older and far more complex than we've been told. The question is no longer if an advanced ancient civilization existed, but how many more are still waiting to be found. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you want to see more of the impossible, don't forget to subscribe. The past is calling.